Okay, one more time, one more week, and one more month, one more Power BI update. And Jay, again with us as pretty much every time.
I try
I
to. Hey, it's your show. I just hang around.
Yeah, you're with us and we are not complaining.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Fine.
And basically, this time we are quite quickly after release, just 2 or 3 days. What is it?
Yep, 2 days.
And today, our main guest basically feature lies within Jay's team, so he is fully responsible for all goods and bads that was delivered with a feature we are talking about today. And Jay, first question before we introduce another guest is why all most requested features start with export?
Well, that's because I think we all know, and we might have opinions on that, that the most pressed button in Power BI is the export button, the export to whatever, CSV, Excel, whatever you want. That functionality is just the most popular one. And I think that that's true for any BI tool, by the way. It's not just Power BI. I think in general, it's any tool that shows you data that people want to export it into Excel to manipulate and work with it. So yeah, for sure, that's the most popular option. We can see that in our telemetry. So of course, then export for visual calculations was also one of the highly requested functionalities. Yes.
And that's why we have as well Simon with you. Simon, nice
Hey,
to have you.
there's
Hi.
Simon. Hello.
Hi,
Howdy.
Simon. Nice to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So yeah, so this is Simon, one of the rock stars on the visual calculations team, and one of the many people that make this feature a reality. That you don't get to see that often. So I'm glad he's here, but he can do his own introduction.
Sure. Yeah, I worked on the feature. But yeah, so I worked on export to Excel when you got a visual calc in the visual, and made it all work. So, well, I
Yep.
made the back end work, not the front end. I don't do front end.
Oh yeah, but that's where hard work is happening, right?
Yeah, oh yeah,
In the back end.
oh yeah, for sure.
Exactly, because there is a little component that sits between so Power BI is based out of layers, right? You basically have your database, your AS engine, and then you have something that translates between the AS engine and our front end. So the front end is the stuff that all paints the pixel onto your screen, the chart, the UI, everything. But the thing that translates what the front end wants to do to queries into the back end to the database and back, that's the component that Simon works on.
Yep.
And that's that code base. That is, I will just call it nasty. It's really complicated stuff. It's really complicated stuff. So yeah,
we are looking forward to learning more about that.
Do you have like a couple of hours for us?
Simon,
couple of days.
And Simon, we were already talking here about few times actually about visual calcs, and we are all making jokes with Jay that it's been in development forever. How long are you working on visual calcs?
Well, I joined the team right when we started development for visual calcs, and that was about a little under 2.5 years ago.
Yep.
So yeah.
Good.
So
all your life.
yeah, basically.
Well, I mean, you did something before at Microsoft.
I did do something before this, and so this counts for me as a small project because before this, I actually worked at Halo. All right, 343 Industries, the video game, and so there it was like a 5-year project. So this to me is still a short project. Matter of perspective.
We're all complaining about how long Visual Calcs works, right? And how long the cycle is. We were complaining about that on the live stream, and here's Simon like, oh, it's just a short project. Stop. Yep.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. And let's just jump into export. So why was it important? How difficult it was to build it? And how it will work.
Yeah, so kind of as you was already saying, right? Export export to data is one of our most requested features. So it's important it works with visual calcs. The tricky thing for building it is kind of like one. I think one was where Jay was involved, right? Is kind of the functional requirements. Is what should he do? Should it include hidden fields? Should it not include hidden fields? Or what exports should include? Because like there's also like several different flavors of export. We wanted to work with all of them. And then the biggest thing for visual calcs is that like it needs to, for the visual calc to calculate correctly, it needs to know what the visual shape is, right? Your visual matrix, and know the space that the visual calcs are calculated in. And so plumbing that through export and getting that to work, that's where the tricky part was for this feature. So.
Yep. Yeah, so as Simon has said, like we have multiple types of export, right? And we went back and forth, like what do you expect? Because we're not talking just about visual calcs, because with visual calcs also comes the ability to hide fields, right? So both of those we needed to solve. It's like, okay, let's say somebody presses export to CSV, right? What is their expectation? I'm assuming they want to see the visual calculations that they have defined on that visual. That makes sense. It should make it into the export. But is a hidden field something you want included in that export or not? And I think we landed on doing it. But for example, if you choose to go export underlying data, then you really end up in a philosophical debate about what is a visual calculation. Because a visual calculation is not part of the model, it's part of the visual.
What you see. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But then if I export underlying data, am I thinking about the visual calc as part of the underlying data? Or is it not part of the underlying data? And is it something that I tagged on top of the underlying data? Hence, should it be in the export or not? Right? So discussions, thinking, matrices were built to just show like, hey, if I choose this, then this happens. If I choose this, then this happens. So something as simple as export results in a lot of like discussions about like, oh, but wait, what about this situation? What about this situation? Then I'm just talking about the functionality, right? Not even talking about making it work.
Yeah, just for conceptually. Yeah.
And that's just like export just seems like, oh, it's just one button.
Seems like, yeah, exactly. That's what I wanted to say. It's like button, put the button, click export, and why it's so complicated? Yeah.
Right. There's 4 or 5 types of export. You have visual calcs, you have hidden fields. So that combination basically gives you all kinds of options, and you need to make a plan together on like what should you do when this combination happens and when this combination happens. And also, if you make a choice to deviate from what the others do, how do we explain that to the user, right? So that's basically where this feature became, where all the things we do on visual calcs is kind of complicated because of this. It's like there's always this yes, but.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Maybe we can see something in action. What do you think, guys? Simon, are you willing to show us this new feature in action?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Nikolai, if you can edit to screen for whatever reason, my laptop is frozen.
Okay, yeah, sure. There you go.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so so for this we made this button enabled whenever you have visual calc. Previous versions,
sound so simple.
Yeah. Previous versions, this was disabled when you had a visual calc, because I have one here. And now or if you had hidden field, and now you can click export data. It gives you the options. I don't have a matrix or table, so this isn't enabled, but I can summarize data. And then these are some of the options we give you, is to live connect to an Excel file or a CSV. And now, as Jay was talking about too, you can do underlying data, which actually doesn't include your visual calc, but does include your hidden fields. And then, so we've hit export to data. We'll see our lovely UI up here. And then we can hit open file. And whenever it opens, I'll bring it across. But yeah, so here, and then if I take you into the visual calc edit mode, you can see I actually had 2 visual calcs on this chart. One of them is just hidden, so that won't show up in our export to Excel. So here I have export to Excel coming in. Let's click enable.
We don't see that yet.
Enable. You don't see this?
No,
Not yet. Yeah.
I think maybe you
Okay.
shared just your browser and not the whole screen.
No, should have showed everything. All right, should I stop sharing and try again?
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Percent, share screen. Oh. Okay, entire screen. Okay, cool. Alrighty, can you guys see the export to Excel now? Cool.
Yes.
Cool. Yep. So you can see here that we got calendar year, calendar quarter, our color, not visual calc, our moving average, which is the visual calc here, and we got sales amount. We didn't get percent of parent, which is our hidden visual calc, because it was hidden. But yeah, and then if you were to compare all the numbers, they line up, which is actually the hard part of this feature, was making sure that the visuals, the calculations, right, are valued in this visual space, as opposed to trying to evaluate in the space of the visual or something else. But yeah.
And then one thing to call out is that I don't think our export includes totals, right? Like we're basically saying, hey, this is just the data, no subtotals, no grand totals included, right? It's just a raw data as normal exports, right?
Yep.
So yeah, that's it.
So I can load it back to Power BI, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could absolutely make the round trip and go, export and then save that as a CSV or Excel as we're doing here, and then load it back into Power BI and then basically treat your visual calc as something that was always there. And then you actually triggered something in my brain. Is that an interesting scenario? You would be able to use a visual calc to then expand your data set and then load that data back through Power Query into Power BI as if it was always there. That's like a wow.
That just came to my mind, so I had to tell. I don't know. I don't have any specific use case on my mind, but yeah.
We might be opening a box of Pandora here a little bit. I don't know.
Then we will cut this off. So
yeah, I'm not sure if I'm happy about that, but yes, okay, fine. No, and again, this is one of those simple things, right? Or you go like, well, this is so simple. Why would it take so long to build this kind of stuff? Is you have to come up with a plan, and then fine. Once you have the plan, you need to make it a reality. And I think what Simon is saying is like, well, okay, great, the plan is there, but then how do we get this visual shape? How do we translate that into the export and basically relaying that into the export? Because that export doesn't know the type of visual it was in, right? Like, it has no idea. It's just a file. So that's really where the hard work comes in, and making sure that it all works and doesn't break in like weird situations, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, it may be a question for both of you guys. I know I'm sure for our audience would be interesting how this process works. I mean, when you start brainstorming, like, should we do it this way or that way? If you can share a little bit more about the whole process behind before you start, real work in the background.
Well, I mean, there's multiple steps, right? So first of all, like, I'm going to jump ahead, right? We're not starting a new feature. It's basically like the feature is already in development. We meet with the whole team, including all the architects, including, for example, people like Jeffrey Wang. We meet every week. So all the engineers, myself, the designer, and the architect, we meet every week. And we talk about hot topics that we have coming up. That might be because, well, hey, engineering, like Simon hit an issue, wants to discuss it with the whole group. It might be that I had some feedback from users that I want to bring up. Might be that there's a big feature coming up in our backlog that we need to talk about and architect, right? So that's basically what we do. And from those discussions, that takes us about an hour every week. Sometimes a little bit longer, depending on how heated the debate is. We normally go through a cycle of creating what we call a mini spec, or what I like to call a mini spec, which is basically for this export one, there was a mini spec saying, hey, this is how export for visual calculations should work. We also have our monster spec for visual calculations, which is over 100 pages long, but that describes everything, but very high level. So it's not detailed enough to go, this is actually how this thing would work. It basically says export should work for visual calcs. End of story, right? So it's more about the vision and not about like the actual functionality when the rubber meets the road. So once the functional description of what we want this feature to do has been written, I basically write that, and that's my proposal to the group, right? It's my proposal to say, I think it should work like this, right? So I make the matrix and go, oh, hey, if you click this, then this should happen. If you click this, then this should happen. It should be included, yes or no. And then invariably, I forget stuff to include cases. I don't oversee everything, and then also oftentimes I'm wrong. And then I present it back to the group, and then people like Simon go like, well, that's great, but no. Or you forgot about this. Or how about this situation? And then we go back once or twice, depending on the size of the feature, and how complicated it is and how much I missed. And then after that, that's basically where I think Simon can tell us a little bit more about what happens next.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So then once we kind of have the functional design, right, we start figuring out like how we could get it to work, and all the implications here. So like, while if I bring up the export to Excel data again, the little window, we have like 3 main options and then like 3 sub options. These two are like radically different code paths. This one actually embeds the DAX query that we generated into your Excel file, and this one just gets the data and stores that in your Excel file. So this one had no way of supporting visual shapes before we started this work. So we had to go and kind of redesign this pipeline, and figure out how we could get the visual shape to work with this, right? And so that was interesting and fun. And then yeah, we talked about like originally this was not going to include hidden, but actually not including hidden in here turned out to be very complicated. So we decided, hey, maybe it makes sense that hidden is included in your underlying data, because there was weird cases where like if you tried to exclude it, you lose stuff that was in your visual. It's kind of a weird case. So we talked about it with Jay, and we're like, hey, like what should happen in these cases? What should happen in those cases? And so we came back and we're like, maybe hidden should be included in underlying data. Maybe that doesn't make sense. So
yeah,
that's what we ended up coming back to.
And this is, I think, a great example where like I can set out to say, no, it's not included, right? That's basically the stake in the ground. And then we all talk about it. And if we on a high level agree on that, it is completely valid while we're engineering this and while we're like actually building this to go, well, wait, if we do this, there is a situation in which the visual shape will break or will just not be representable. So that means that we have to go back to original functional requirements and adapt, right? And then, so this is always the balance that we need to find, because of course I am there my goal is to build the best experience for the user, right? I'm the representative, I'm the voice of the user basically in the group. I try to describe what I think users want, right? But I can ask for whatever, I can ask for the whole universe, but I know if I ask for the whole universe, then it's never going to be built, right? So immediately I always like, okay, instead of aiming for the whole universe, I aim for a single star, right? Knowing that there might be situations that we have to change and maybe land on the moon. And I'm not saying that in this case we landed on the moon, right? Because in fact, I think what we had to do because of what we discovered while Simon was working on this is actually a good thing. But those things just come up. It's like, oh, we forgot about this case. What happens if, because we said in the beginning, oh, underlying data doesn't include visual calcs, doesn't include hidden items, done, right? And then we discovered, well, wait, if we exclude hidden items from underlying data, that actually breaks the visual shape in this and this and this situation. So can we, instead of trying to fix it then and putting the pieces together, change the requirement to say, oh, let's just include hidden items. That's cheaper for us down the line because the visual shape doesn't break. And also, does it really hurt? No. And maybe it's actually a really good thing, right? So then, and this is what I meant, right? Visual calcs, we think, are not part of your underlying data because those are things you tag on. But your hidden columns, you could argue, are part of your underlying data, because if you create a visual and you create 5 hidden columns as intermediate products and you're only showing the last column, one visual calc, then to the visual calc, those 5 intermediate columns are the underlying columns.
Yeah, and dependency to some extent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then it should be
Yeah,
part
yeah.
of
So,
underlying
like,
data.
what if
Yeah.
you just have visual calcs and hidden measures, right? Like, do you not export anything, or do you? In that case, you turn on the hidden fields. So then we decided it was kind of better just to turn them on everywhere, because you kind of get in this weird zone. Or what
Yeah.
if there's like a relationship between your hidden field and that thing that's not hidden? You get in some weird corner cases.
Didn't we have a situation that if we didn't include hidden, we would just end up with an empty export?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
Yeah, yeah.
nothing.
You
So you would see a button,
yeah.
you click on it, and then the export would be
Nothing.
empty. That's
Yeah,
weird.
that would be weird. Yeah.
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 So
Yeah.
So it's like all these little things just come up down the line. And I think what happens in this particular one, we skipped over a step because there was no really new design for UI design, right? Because we didn't build any new UI, right? Of course, if you're adding new UI pieces like this formula bar or some highlights somewhere, then of course the designer also steps in and makes sure that the colors are right, the placement is right, the font is right, the text is correct, it's accessible, another very important step. So that's all happening in conjunction with like the functional requirements, right? And then before people like Simon get like actually working on this, all that should be more or less done and dusted. And I think you created a bunch of technical designs as well, right, Simon? Or at least one functional specification for this, technical specification, right?
Yep. Yeah, I wrote a tech doc for this that kind of covered all these scenarios and what we need to do for each scenario to get it to work. Right, and worked with the export to Excel guys, which I'm not on the export to Excel team, right? I'm on the visual calc team, so we work closely with the export to Excel guys and kind of figured out, how this currently works today, because I didn't know. And I got ramped up on that, and then figured out how we could marry these two, right, and how we could export the visual calcs and kind of the stuff that we add new functionality we need to add, like I mentioned, right? This export to Excel with live connection just wasn't going to work, so we needed to kind of go down a different pipeline in the code for this.
And those technical specifications get reviewed as well. They get sign off, right? And that literally sometimes goes to like, we need to change this here in this line of code almost, right? And then the other thing that Simon is saying here is like, oh, so reaching out to another team, and then we need to make changes to this thing. Great, to support the scenario, but that also means we cannot afford breaking anything else, right? It cannot be that because we made changes to export, because we wanted to allow visual calcs to be exported, it cannot be that we then inadvertently broke the export for non-visual calc scenarios, right? Like, so, okay, we re-architect it. Well, that means that, great, we enable new functionality, but better the old functionality still works the same, right? And that's where it gets really tricky.
Yep.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
How big is the team behind this feature? So all the people that were doing actual development, if we are removing creating specification and everything, actual development is how big?
So how many people are there on the squad, Simon?
I'd say about 8 or so.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just people day to day, fully or almost fully committed to it, right?
Yep.
Teams have other features that they work on, right? The same team under the same managers, for example, also the owners of field parameters, which is also PM'd by myself. So we're basically like tied to the hip, right? Like basically all the features that this engineering manager that Simon reports into owns are basically owned by me from a PM perspective. So they own more than just visual calculations, but like day to day, the team is slightly bigger than these 8 people, but day to day, these are the eight folks that actually work on it. And that's divided between backend, like Simon and others, and front end, which is responsible for like the formula bar, the highlights, and all the things that you see, the actual stuff you see happening.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's always good to hear insights from feature. Everybody out there thinks it's an export button, put it there and it's working.
How hard
we
can it
spend
be?
now, I don't know, 10, 12 minutes just discussing entire process, staying behind it, plus entire time and number of people invested. And I think that's great for viewers out there dealing with Power BI, putting ideas on idea.power BI.
And
Simply,
You-
for us end users, some things might seem super easy.
yeah, and by the way, when we say the 8, we actually have dialed down to just the engineers working on it, right? Then you have somebody like me, so that's 9. We have the architects; there are 3 involved, right? So then, and you have a designer. So very quickly, you ramp up to like 12 people, right? Which those spend their time elsewhere as well. So if you really want to talk about who's actually day-to-day working on this, it's just those 8. But I think the whole enchilada, especially, for example, when Simon needs to talk to somebody on export to Excel, well, they are also partly now invested into Visual Calc, right? Or when we make changes to the visual, or for example, when we did the Visual Calc formatting, so that formatting ability in the format pane, we had to reach out to another team to make sure, because, well, hey, they own the formatting pane. We're making changes there. Make sure that that works, is in line with their vision of where they're taking it, and we're not building something they need to redo tomorrow, right? So then suddenly this whole group becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And of course, those people are just only there for like small portions of the feature, but it's just a lot of like coordination on this like scale. Like writing software on a Microsoft scale is not easy, I can tell you. It's not easy stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. Okay, so what are the plans for the future? I mean, with this export-specific export functionality, is this it? Like, no. Okay.
No.
Can you share something? I mean, if you can,
that
would be great.
I can't share my like, I don't want to break my NDA, but we're still working on it. The team has not been disbanded or whatever, not by a long shot. That's not even a conversation, right, that we're having. So there's still a lot of stuff coming, mostly for now short term, about like other functionality we want to support, right? Like we've been just chugging away, like, oh, you should be able to format them, you should be able to use field parameters, you should be able to export them, right? So from here you can probably fill in the blanks to go like, well, you should be able to use it with XYZ.
XYZ, yeah.
So that's the thing we're doing right now. But in the meantime, and since we now explained the process a little bit, we can also say, well, at the same time, there's multiple other features for this big feature in flight in various different stages, right? So for example, there's now technical designs being made for another feature that we want to build on Visual Calcs. We're talking on the functional level and the architecture level about another feature, right? Like new functions being added. And then the biggest thing the biggest things that are still coming for Visual Calcs is making it visual. Like, we picked the name Visual Calcs for 2 reasons. One, it's a calc. It's on a visual. That's one reason. But the other reason is the word visual. The other meaning of the word visual. It is supposed to be very visual, right? And I think if you look at the current experience now, there's an awful lot of what I call non-visual. There's an awful lot of typing.
Yeah.
It should be more easy. It should be more visual. It should be more, I can click somewhere, I can do something, I see what is happening, I can immediately mentally check that what I just did is the right thing that I wanted to do. Instead of now, I'm just typing a formula and pressing enter, crossing my fingers and hoping I did the right thing. We're going to change that, right? We're going to flip that whole thing around. And that's the big thing of what we promised with Visual Calcs that we haven't shown, we're still working on. We talked about, like, as a visionary statement, right? Whenever I do a talk about Visual Calcs, we talk about that as a visionary statement, but none of that has seen the light of day yet. And all of that is still in the works and coming. And if you think export takes a long time because such a simple feature, imagine building a whole visual way of thinking about calculations. That is not a simple feature. That's not just enabling a button, right? That is a whole new surface. So that takes a lot more time than...
It doesn't have any back-end work, though.
I'm seeing Jay here that we'll be talking here a lot about Visual Calcs in the future.
I mean, once I start talking, I can't stop. You know that. So.
Yeah.
No, but we'll be busy on visual calculations for a while. We're not declaring general availability, and even after general availability, we will continue working on it. There's a lot more stuff that we want to build with this goal in mind that DAX should be. I know there's some people in the community that hate me for saying that DAX is hard, but I still think DAX is too hard. Like just this morning, I had a conversation with an MVP about, well, is on or after is so illogical if you use it in a statement, because actually comparing whether something is before that date that you just passed into this function, right? Stuff like that is like mind-boggling to me that DAX is so complicated sometimes. So with that in mind, we're not done to make DAX easier. So that is our goal, and that's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to dumb it down, right? That's another thing. We're trying to make it easier, but still powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So you
And that's,
put
of
it,
course, an interesting
you put
balance.
it as your mission to make DAX simple.
Sorry, you're breaking up for me a little bit.
Yeah, I said you put it as your mission to make DAX simple.
Easier, yes.
Simple and easy.
Yes.
Because there is now saying simple but not easy.
Yes. So I'm trying to make it both simple and easy. But of course, that is in the eye of the beholder, right? Like what is simple for somebody might still be too complicated for somebody else.
Sure,
right?
sure.
I'm not trying to dumb it down. I'm not trying to say you don't need to learn DAX. That's not what we're trying to do. What I'm just saying is that, hey, on day one or day whatever, you shouldn't have to do all the training and read all the books to be successful with DAX, right? There should be a state in which you can just pick up the product and go, hey, basic stuff that I need to do that I know how to do in Excel should be doable without me requiring a lot of extra knowledge that I need to acquire. And then, of course, once you really want to dive in, once you dedicated yourself to this product and you want to become an expert, of course, you should take the training and read all the books and become an actual expert. But there should be a state that once you're just onboarded onto this and you have some Excel formula background, that you feel comfortable working with that. And I think that is not the case today. And that's what we're trying to solve. And another case in point, I know I'm rambling, but this is my favorite statistic, is we can collect telemetry about the stuff that people type in DAX. We don't see what you actually type. We don't see the column names. We don't see any values. We see the patterns, right? So we see that somebody is trying to do a measure equals sum of value pattern, right? So that we only see that you wrote sum. We don't know what value you're summing, but we see you do measure equals sum of value. Mm-hmm. We see a lot of measure equals value minus value. That will not work because a measure requires aggregates.
Mm-hmm.
These people that do this, they often disappear. We never see them again. Which leads me to concluding that they try to apply their Excel thinking to DAX. They end up in a measure. They try to write value minus value because that's what I see here over here in the data pane, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why can I not just subtract that? And then they get an error and they never come back and they give up. That's a problem.
Yeah.
We're basically losing people there. So let's make that simpler.
Completely agree.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Yeah, I think like more than half an hour passed so fast. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes. Definitely, Simon. Thanks for. Yeah, sure. Sorry, Jay. Go ahead.
Oh, this should teach you never to pick a visual calc feature again.
No. Definitely. First of all, Simon, thanks for all the hard work in the background. We all appreciate that. Thanks. And yeah, Jay, thanks for pushing this. Many people will bless you for sure. So yeah.
And I think it's just great that we get to talk about like other people and invite other people that make all of this happen, right? Like you always see the PMs right? You see all those guys and or girls or whatever, right? They're all, you see them very visually. They're all online and whatever. But the actual people that make this thing work are, the ones like Simon, right? And you don't see those that often. And
Yeah.
just realize that a feature like Visual Calcs has 8 people working on it day-to-day full time. Now take all the other features, look at those and go like, how complicated is this? How many people would we potentially put on that? And that's the size of the group of actual heroes working behind the scenes.
Just keep up the great work.
They're trying.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Thank you both, Simon and Jay. And although Jay said we will not invite Visual Calcs anymore, I'm sure there will be a lot of interesting features coming in near or longer future. But it was a great pleasure first seeing how export will work, but most of all understanding how the process behind looks like, and trying to explain people that it's not a button. It is a lot of actual work, a lot of people spending their time, and thank you for that.
Yep.
And looking forward to what's coming.
Cool. Well,
Cool.
thanks for
Thanks.
another great episode. Thanks, Simon, for joining.
Thanks,
Yeah, you're
Simon.
welcome.
Thanks,
You're
Jay.
welcome. Yep,
Thanks
thank you, guys.
everyone for joining. Thanks.
See
Thanks,
you
Nick.
next month.
See you next month.
Bye.
Have a
See ya.
good evening. Bye bye.